Silence of the Lambs. It's a 1988 novel by Thomas Harris. It's the example probably of the serial killer novels, which gave birth to the biggest serial killer movie of all times. Same name, Silence of the Lambs, which starred Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins is Hannibal Lecter, the doctor, the insane psychologist that Clarice goes to see in prison to get information on the person that they're trying to get at the moment, Buffalo Bill, who has, as the book goes along, has kidnapped a junior senator's daughter, and thus all the weight of everything has come down upon her and her boss, Jack Crawford. It's extremely well. This is a book that it's like, just as a piece of thriller fiction, seems to be so well constructed. It's amazing that that the movie actually, it's a tribute to the movie, that it actually was able to condense things down just that much more to make it to a movie thing. But the book itself seems extremely well honed, and just really zips along and has you going at every page. And of course, it creates the great villain in Hannibal Lecter. The story is, if I didn't butcher it already, is Clarice Starling, a student at the time of the for the FBI, is plucked out by Jack Crawford to go and visit Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter, who's already made an appearance in the 1981 book by Thomas Harris, Red Dragon. I believe, I haven't actually read it. This is a clear example of something where you could just read Silence of the Lambs and not have any other familiarity, and it would, you're not lost at all. I wouldn't, if I didn't know this was a sequel, I wouldn't know. I would have just thought this was like, there's cunning backstory put in here, which you think, oh, this is just that fills it out. But no, this is apparently a reference to the novel before it. So she's sent there to try and get information from Lecter about this new serial killer, new Buffalo Bill, who skins his victims. When the book came out, and the movie itself were both kind of, there was anger against it, because the Buffalo Bill is portrayed as sort of as a serial killer who is, while he's not a transsexual, he's portrayed that way. He portrays kind of a very kind of cliched kind of gay man, kind of swishy kind of speech. He's got a cute little dog, which I can see with just the history of a lot of books like this. When you're villainizing, when you're othering communities, you take the elements that make mainstream society uncomfortable, and you make it into a horrible murderous villain to just sort of dramatize that unease, which, you know, it's the worst kind of demonizing that way. It's interesting that within the book itself, when Jack Crawford goes and leans against one of the centers where they're doing the gender reassignment surgery, the doctor is like, look, this is bullshit. Transgendered people are actually kind of rated as actually less violent than the general population. They're not perverts. They're not maniacs. They're just, people who've got an issue which they want to solve, and they've got all this shit piled against them, and they don't need, assholes like you coming in and hunting them down and stuff like that. And so the book tries to play it both ways, but you can feel it. And indeed, you can also just talk about this book in the sense of mental illness, because Hannibal Lecter is amazing. He's great. He is like Darth Vader. He is like Frankenstein. He is like Dracula. He is he's embodying something like evil. I mean, they talk about this in the book of like, oh, is there such a thing as evil? And this is evil. This is evil. We're not going to talk about, oh, he's been mistreated. No, he was born evil. And as a villain, as a thing, he works tremendously. As an embodiment of our fears, of our, he's a cannibal. He's extremely reasoned, but he's savage, and he eats people, and he likes proper manners, and he'll kill you, he'll murder you because of it, or he'll just murder you because you get in his way. So there's a lot of this, almost like, the dream of reason produces monsters, and it's like Hannibal Lecter is yet another monster that has been produced from this morass. But as something to kind of, as so, and that level of the psychology, that works. But as the idea of people with mental derangements, just, as someone who's going to have like enough organization to be able to actually do to walk down the street, to clothe themselves, to do proper stuff. It works better as a symbol than it does as, you should take this as literal fact. And I don't know if people do. I mean, these are powerful symbols. Something like Hannibal Lecter is something of how we view society. He is the monster that lurks down the streets that might get you. So I have I feel slightly conflicted there of it's like, I don't think this is a world that I want to like read all the books and just sink myself into, even though it's such a well-crafted, amazing book. So there's that. Actually, I think it's more successful of a lot of the kind of class stuff in the book. Clarice is someone who comes from a lower class society and has kind of pulled herself up by her bootstraps as the education, is someone who in the 80s, and where we're getting definitely the start of like a lot of what would be considered gender wars, she's, as a woman, trying to break her way into this field. It works quite well as I feel that of like the kind of an 80s kind of a feel of that kind of battle, that kind of stuff going on. She makes a great protagonist that way, which is interesting in the sense of that Buffalo Bill, to not give away anything, is someone who seems to be, he's fascinated with the feminine to the point of wanting that's part of the reason why he's killing these women, and killing women who aren't the traditional small petite women, but killing larger women, which is, there's some interesting mixes in there of stuff, which I think the best kind of popular thriller really taps into. It can really, and this book does that so well. And I mean, I guess that's the Hannibal Lecter thing, that's the Buffalo Bill thing, that's that Clarice Starling thing. It's interesting that Jack Crawford, who is a much more larger part of the book, in this book you find out that his wife is dying of cancer, and that he's kind of struggling through that as the events of the novel are going along. That was definitely excised or pulled further back in the movie, and his part is much less a thing. This is much more, in the book you can see there's more of a trio of the three of them, whereas in the movie it definitely just becomes the two, Clarice and Hannibal Lecter, and Buffalo Bill, who were chasing after. So I guess 3, 4, but yeah. So it's I find it very impressive just how well this taps into just all those different kind of potent mixes of the unease, the just sort of iconic evil of a kind of what the Victorians were calling like the New Woman. This is like the 80s New Woman kind of thing, and mixing that together in this book, and in not an unsympathetic way either, because you could be saying like, oh, the crime novels are very kind of conservative things where they're gonna like, well, we want to kind of conserve order. It's like, no, this is actually it's got quite kind of a lot of subversive threads in there too, that wants to pull and poke and discomfort the reader, and challenge them. So yes, that is my review of Silence of the Lambs.